Hello and welcome to another episode of the Journey with Me podcast, where the journey is greater than the destination. I, of course, am your host, Holly Harris, your journey girl, helping you to manage the middle. And of course, as you can see today, I am making another video because I feel like this topic, once again, will be beneficial to both my platforms, both on YouTube as well as on Apple or wherever you get your podcast, the audio version, that is. And so today I wanted to talk about, I feel like, what is an important topic, and that is developing a spirit of excellence and also maintaining one in times of difficulty. This is definitely something that I'm still trying to master. So definitely do not think because I'm teaching on it that I have perfected all things, because that is, not the case. But I felt like it was a topic that I could both learn from as well as share with my audience. And when I think about having a spirit of excellence, of course, what comes to mind is Daniel in the Bible, because he definitely exemplified a spirit of excellence. He developed one as well as maintained one throughout his assignment. And so I'm going to start by reading Daniel chapter 1, and we'll just kind of unpack from there. And so Daniel chapter 1 reads, "And in the third reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hands with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his gods, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel and the king's seed and of the princesses, children in whom has no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge and understanding, science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongues of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names. For he gave unto Daniel the name of Belshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. I'm probably butchering these names. But Daniel proposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of eunuchs. And the prince of eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, that as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So he consented to them in this manner and proved them 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, their countenance appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now, at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, or Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. And in all manners of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. And Daniel continued even until the first year of King Cyrus. And so that was Daniel chapter 1, all the way through the end of that first chapter. So we see Daniel here, along with his 3 other brothers, being chosen by King Nebuchadnezzar to learn the way of the Chaldeans, to learn their tongue, to learn science, to just learn all things as it relates to wisdom and knowledge, and again, science. And of course, again, they were chosen, and there was a 3-year training period that took place of them learning of all of these things. And so, training basically, of course, picture this: they are in exile. Of course, they've been taken over by King Nebuchadnezzar, and they're now in Babylon. And so they're being asked by the king, to come forward to learn their ways, to learn their traditions, to learn science, to learn wisdom, to get understanding. And they were chosen, out of all of the children of Israel. So, they were already favored. And so they were brought, of course, before the king. Again, the training took 3 years, and training was a way to assimilate the best and the brightest for the next generation, to basically assimilate them into Babylonian culture. Okay. And so, and then you see here, there in verse number 7, the prince of eunuchs changed their names, because Daniel's name went to Belshazzar, and Hananiah went to Shadrach, Mishael became Meshach, and Azariah became Abednego. And so the process of changing their names was basically to exercise authority over them, to exercise authority over their destiny. And many times these Babylonian names acknowledged the Babylonian gods. And so there was a lot going on here with the changing of the name. And in doing my research, I was like, wow. So, because when you think about, there is a lot in a name, when it comes to biblical times, a child's name basically contained their essence, basically contained their destiny, and said, this is who this person is going to be based off of what they were named. So the power in the name, they understood that. So in order to strip them of their identity from where they had come from, they gave them Babylonian names. And in doing so, it was an exercise in authority over them. It was an exercise in trying to control their destiny. And it was also an exercise in them acknowledging their gods, Babylonian gods. And so, yeah, so this is interesting already. And so we see, as we go down into verse 8, why Daniel was so adamant about not wanting to take of the king's meat, because many times meat and wine, if you were to sit and eat at someone's table, it was a symbol of acceptance. It was a symbol of assimilation. And so this was the one thing that Daniel had that he could control. He's living in this other environment where they're serving a completely different God. And so they're telling them what to do, what to learn, all of the things, where to sleep. And they're saying, this is what we're going to give you to eat. And many times the food and the wine had been offered to other gods. So there's a lot going on here. And so we see why Daniel was adamant about this, about having some form of resistance towards this new culture that he was now a part of. And so, in order to, again, maintain some type of control, he took the one thing that he still had a choice in the matter in doing, and that was the food that he ate. And so this was his choice. This was his opportunity to preserve some level of his own distinct identity. So we start to see, that the Daniel fast is not just, because it was just something he wanted to do, but it was symbolic of a lot of things. Of, no, you're not going to control me. I'm not going to assimilate to this culture that I'm now a part of. Okay. And so we see here in verse 8, the first thing that Daniel does is he purposes in his heart, right? So reading that again, it says, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portions of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Okay, but we see that God had given him favor with the eunuch. It says in verse 9, now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of eunuchs. Okay, verse 10, and the prince of eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces, worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king. So he's basically saying, hey, Daniel, if you're not eating the same meat as the other children who are being trained, he's going to tell the difference. There's going to be a noticeable difference in your countenance. You're not going to be as strong, and it's going to be my head that's going to be in trouble if I do this for you. Okay. So, but then Daniel, he comes back, he reassures the eunuch. He says in verse 12, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. And of course, pulse is vegetables. Okay. Then in verse 13, let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat the portion of the king's meat. And as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So he consented to them in this matter and proved them 10 days. And of course, after he comes back the 10 days, he sees, oh, okay, you guys, they're fairer and, fatter in flesh is what the scripture says than all the children that ate the king's meat. Okay, so then, of course, once he sees this, he agrees for the rest of the next 3 years to only give them the vegetables and, the water. Okay, so, most people think of the Daniel's fast as just 21 days. And there is a passage of scripture where he fasts for 21 days. But in this particular part of the text, he was in training for 3 years and did not accept the king's meat. And so, and it's not really about a diet thing. It was a form of protest. It was a form of distinguishing himself from everybody else. And that's where it started. It started with him being able to control his appetite. So that's a my God, that's probably number one. I ain't even had that on the list. But the best ways to get to a place to where you can begin to develop a spirit of excellence is to first bring your appetite into submission. is to make a decision, because it says, right, that David purposed in his heart. That's the first thing he did in Daniel chapter 1, verse 8, that he would not defile himself, right? So he was able to bring his appetite, his desires, what he wanted, into submission. And so that's one of the first things we need to do if we're going to ever get to a place to where we walk in a spirit of excellence. We have to be able to discipline our appetite. We have to be able to, and again, look beyond food, right? We have to be able to wrestle our appetites into submission. You know, the things that we desire that go against God's word. We need to be able to bring those things under subjection. So that's the first step towards moving towards a spirit of excellence, is bringing our appetites into under subjection or into submission. Okay. And then and he did that, right, by purposing within his heart. Daniel made a decision. He was willing to commit to this for 3 years. The whole time he was in training, he was willing to commit to this. So he purposed it in his heart. He made a decision within his heart. And a lot of times, you know, we can think that walking in a spirit of excellence comes by osmosis, but it's literally just a decision to say, hey, I'm going to be excellent. I'm going to do the best that I can do at this, period, point blank, regardless, you know. And so it's a decision. At the end of the day, it starts with a decision, and it's a decision to get beyond what I want, to bring my appetite under submission, me purposing in my heart to bring my destructive desires into submission in order to embrace healthier habits, in order to embrace healthier ways of doing things. And so this goes beyond food. It's about a mindset. It's about moving from a destructive mindset into a more healthier mindset. It's about taking on the mind of the spirit and leaving the mind of the flesh behind. And so that's the first thing Daniel did. He purposed within his heart. He brought his desires. He brought his appetite under subjection. And again, like I said before, it's about making a decision. It doesn't come by osmosis. It's not some epiphany that happens. The epiphany that happens is making a decision. Okay. And so the next thing we see is that he put up boundaries. He put up guardrails, right? He put them in place in order to set himself up for success. Okay. Because, right, he talks to the eunuch. He said, hey, bring me only pulse and water. Right? He set himself up for success. He put them boundaries in place, because had he kept bringing the meat, eventually he might have given in to the temptation to eat meat. But guess what? He said, eunuch, bring me only vegetables and water. So if that's all you're being presented with, that's all you're going to eat. Daniel understood. A lot of people look at Daniel as, oh, he was just strong and he was fortified and he was focused. He was all of those things, but he was also wise. He had the wisdom enough to know that, hey, if you put it in front of me, I might be tempted to eat it. So just bring me vegetables and water. So he put those guardrails in place. He set those boundaries for himself so that he could be set up for success. And so we have to do the same. We can't expect to continue to put ourselves in certain situations and circumstances and come out victorious. We have to be willing to set those boundaries so that we're not even presented with certain things. The Bible talks about us resisting the devil so that he would flee. And so that's a part of our resistance, is us setting those boundaries to keep us as far away from temptations that take us into those bad habits as possible. And so this is what Daniel did. He set those boundaries. He set those guardrails in place. Only bring me vegetables and water. Then not only that, he surrounded himself with people who had the same mindset. Let's not forget, um, Hananiah and Mishael and Azariah, right? They were doing it too. He wasn't doing it alone. And so we have to be willing to surround ourselves with people who have an excellent mindset, people who are going somewhere, people who, say they're going to do something and they actually do it, people who are going to hold us accountable, people that are trying to go somewhere. And so we have to align ourselves with like-minded people. And Daniel did the same thing, right? And then not only did he do that, but he developed consistency in that area. Over the 3-year period, they did this. So this begins to train consistency within him, right? And this just kind of brings something to mind, that we have to allow life to train us, right? Sometimes we think that life is happening to us, that we're just going to work and we're doing this and we're doing that, or we're just doing our saintly duty in church. But no, skills are being trained. Mindsets are being trained. The way you do things are being trained. And so we have to look at life as an opportunity to train us, especially when we're going through difficulty, especially when we're in a foreign place, especially when we're at a place we've never been before. We're like, God, what is going on? No, like, okay, you may have that first thought, like, God, what is going on? But okay, God, what can I learn from this? What are you trying to teach me out of this? And so every opportunity in life is a learning opportunity. And so we have to allow life to train us, because not only, was Daniel in this place that he'd never been before, but they're serving other gods. They have a different way of doing things. So he has to learn their ways, but he's still navigating, as someone who believes in the God of Israel. It's like, okay, y'all might be doing that, but I'm going to do this. But I'm going to take the training. Because guess what? Even though I'm in this foreign place, even though, I can't stand being here, I'm going to take the training and I'm going to use it to better myself. I'm going to use it to better my relationship with God. I'm going to use it to make my relationship with the Lord stronger. I'm going to use it to fortify myself. I'm going to use it to become an excellent person, full of wisdom and full of understanding. And so this is what Daniel is doing. He's using this opportunity in bondage, this opportunity in captivity to grow, right? And so this is what cultivates discipline within us, right? And we see, right, as we go further into the story, Daniel chapter 1, verse 17, it says, as for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. It says in all learning and wisdom, in all visions and dreams. And so God, he saw the discipline and the consistency that they had developed over time, and the spirit of excellence that he had developed. And so it's like, okay, now I can trust you with more. And so God gives him understanding and visions and dreams and skills and learning and in wisdom, right? And so, that's what happens, when we develop a spirit of excellence. God sees that he can trust us with more. And many times he'll begin to open up new gifts on the inside of you. Okay. And so again, discipline, that's the root word of disciple, is discipline. And so, Daniel is developing discipline throughout this entire time. And so once it gets to the end of the days of his training, after the 3 years, in verse 18, it says, verse 19, it says, and once the eunuch brought them before the king, he sat with them. And it said he communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. So they had the privilege of standing before the king because they finished their training and they had exceeded everybody. They had exceeded them all. And so they were the ones chosen to stand before the king. And so we see it says, it even says that they were found to be 10 times better. I'm not sure if it's in this scripture area. If you, let me see. Yeah. And then and as it even goes into verse 20, it says, and in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realms. So, of course, because the Babylonians were pagans and served other gods, they consulted magicians, astrologers, mediums when it came to deciphering dreams that they had, when it came to getting answers about the future. That's who they consulted. And so you see why God gave Daniel a measure of grace in visions and dreams and understanding all wisdom to present the opposite of what the Babylonians normally consulted, because he had a plan for Daniel, and he knew that Daniel was going to be able to decipher codes in the spirit that these magicians and astrologers could only dream of. And so he added that gift onto him because of his faithfulness, right? And when you go further into the text in Daniel, it talks about him having an excellent spirit. I believe it was when during Darius's reign, I believe he found him to have an excellent spirit. And that's what happens. There's a shift that happens to where you go from operating in a spirit of excellence to having an excellent spirit, to where the very essence of you is excellent. And so you it's not just something operating in a spirit of excellence to where it comes on you and comes off of you. He began to embody an excellent spirit. And when I looked that up in the Strong's definition, it says preeminent, right? The preeminent is someone who exceeds them all, right? Surpassing, extreme, extraordinary. And isn't that what God calls us to be? It talks about us being peculiar people, and so being distinct, being someone who stands out. Daniel had distinguished himself from everybody. And so, he was faithful. And it even goes on later in the text. I think again, when Darius was reigning, that the other wise men got jealous, because he kept being promoted. Daniel, he was interpreting dreams, he was finding favor in the king's sight, and they was mad. They were like, okay, how can we get this man out of here? And so the only way that they knew to do it was to challenge Daniel's relationship with God. And so they tricked the king into making a decree that no one could consult another God for 30 days. And of course, Daniel was not going to abide by that. He was faithful. He was consistent. This was something that he did and this was a discipline for him. And so he was going to pray to God. And so they caught him praying to God. And the penalty for that was to be thrown into the lion's den. And so these group of men came together and they tried to force the king to enforce that decree, because the king didn't want to do it. He was up all night. He was like, I can't, but because he had made the decree, he had to follow through. And so he throws him into the lion's den. And of course, you know the story. God shuts the mouth of the lion, and the people who actually came against him ended up being thrown into the den. Not just them, but their family members too. And so And then, of course, once again, he was elevated the more. And every time God delivered Daniel out of a situation, it brought Nebuchadnezzar closer and closer to God, as far as him acknowledging that he was serving the real and true God. And so, because of Daniel's faithfulness, his tenure of service extended over a 65-year period, because he was faithful, because he was consistent, because he had an excellent spirit. Okay. And not only that, Daniel, he maintains that excellent spirit through several different kings who had different ways of doing things, different ways of ruling, different styles of leadership. He was able to excel regardless of the turbulence he experienced being in captivity, or these different kings personalities, or the way they ruled. He found favor with all of them, and his tenure of service kept being extended, and he kept being promoted. Okay. And he didn't change to fit culture. you know he was willing to go against the grain. He was willing to do the opposite of what he was seeing in order to distinguish himself. And so and again, his excellence caused those who didn't believe to believe. Can you imagine being that excellent that people literally say, "Who is your God?" You are, so phenomenal, and walking in these things and doing what the Lord has given into your hands to do, that people begin to ask themselves, "Who is your God?" Or they begin to glorify your God, because you are displaying a spirit of excellence, and in doing so, you are honoring God. Okay. And so, yeah, it's the life of Daniel is it's amazing, but just to see how he was able to, navigate through a tough situation, being in a foreign land, being somewhere where you would think that one would shrink, that one would just say, "You know what? I'm being held captive. I'm just going to skate through. I'm just going to do the bare minimum. I'm just gonna, do what everybody else is doing, just so I won't get in trouble or be killed." Back in them times, if you disobeyed, as you can see, lion's den. Then you had Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Of course, those were the Babylonian names they were given, that were thrown in the fiery furnace because they would not bow down to the golden image, right? And so they, of course, were delivered and were promoted as well. And as a result, and then the king once again acknowledges God, because he delivered them out of the furnace. And so, Daniel wasn't the only extraordinary one, but he, ran in crowds that were extraordinary. And so, yeah, it's his life is pretty remarkable, when it comes to just having that level of stickability and discipline. And so that's how we maintain. That's how we first develop a spirit of excellence, and maintaining a spirit of excellence even in difficult times. It's basically boils down to a decision, to deciding that I'm going to be excellent, and I'm going to maintain my excellence throughout whatever situation, especially, during times like today. And it's like, okay, you may be thinking to yourself, how do I maintain a spirit of excellence when I feel defeated, when, you may have lost your job and you're trying to figure out what's next for you? Well, you start by making a decision. You start by getting up every morning, regardless, and taking a bath as if you're going to work, putting on clothes as if you're going to work, looking for jobs, pounding the pavement, or starting that business. That's how you maintain that spirit of excellence, and don't allow yourself to fall into depression. And so, yeah, Definitely there is a way. Let's look at his example. Let's first purpose it in our heart and make a decision. Let's be willing to bring our appetites under submission and what we want to do, and look to what God wants us to do. Let's set up those boundaries and those guardrails that are going to ensure that we have success, right? Let's surround ourselves with like-minded people who live in excellence and seek to please God and seek to be the best version of themselves. Let's surround ourselves with people like that, and let's allow ourselves to make that a healthy habit by being consistent. By being consistent in that thing, we begin to develop a habit to where we move into we move from bad habits into healthy habits. We move from just operating in a spirit of excellence to having an excellent spirit. And so, yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you today. I hope this was a blessing to you. Um, Hopefully, I didn't butcher the names too much, and that you enjoyed this and can take this on your journey and help you in maintaining a spirit of excellence regardless of what's going on. Because let me tell you, it's a lot going on. I was just watching the news today, like, God, what in the world? And it's enough to make you retreat. It's enough to make you hide under a rock. It's enough to make you just want to do the bare minimum. God, is it even making any, is my life even making a dent anyway? I'm tired. I'm just gonna lay down and just wallow, because I don't want to deal with what is going on. And it can make you want to do that. It can make you want to retreat and give up and just throw up your hands. But it's a time that we can continue to maintain excellence, that we can continue to stay focused and continue to do the things that God has given unto us to do. So again, I hope this encouraged you. God bless you.